And on this week's episode of Ford News Podcast, the presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala Harris is streaking in popularity. Her numbers are getting better. Her popularity is getting stronger. She's like a locomotive traveling down the tracks. We talk about that and more coming your way right now here on Ford News. He is Johnathan Ford. You can follow him on X at FordJohnathan5. I am Brian London. Follow me at MiamiRadioBeast. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm wearing my new Kamala Harris 24 t-shirt. Like Johnathan has his on order, so soon we'll be all decked out. And Johnathan, it's been amazing to see how Kamala Harris's numbers have just continued to go up. Her favorability rating, all of the numbers just keep going higher and higher as we are now a week in to her candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
Right now, she can do absolutely no wrong with the enthusiasm right now with the Democratic Party. And to me, it's uplifting just to see the amount of not only fundraising, but people that are attending her rallies. And also we have favorability ratings that have significantly increased in just days. And we're not talking about weeks. Normally we would see poll numbers or favorability numbers slowly creep up, but we're seeing it drastically jump in just the past 7 days with VP Harris just completely on fire. And right now, I don't think there's much she could do wrong in the eyes of the Democratic Party as far as one, sealing up the nomination, and two, right now, she has Donald Trump on his heels. And right now, she has more paths to 270 than what Donald Trump currently has.
You know, Johnathan, listen, you and I, very loyal to Joe Biden, right? Love President Biden. And I know that you were really upset at the way the media treated President Biden. But if hindsight is 2020, looking back at President Biden's selfless decision to step aside and hand the campaign off to Kamala Harris, right now it's looking like the right move if the only goal is to beat Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's no question now, just looking back, that it was the right move, just with the numbers that we're seeing and the donations and the campaigns and the PACs releasing the money. It's just my only sore spot was just that with the dedication and the amount of time that we put in to getting President Biden elected, and not to mention the time that he put in for this country. I just felt like the way that he went out, or the way he was forced out, in my eyes, left a little bit of bitter taste. But in hindsight, he made the most consequential speech probably maybe in U.S. history as far as selflessness act that he did.
Whoa. There's been some pretty amazing speeches in U.S. history. I don't know if we have to go that, the FDR speech, there's been some huge speeches. Let's not go that far. It was definitely the biggest speech he gave in his presidency. I'll give you that.
Nobody has ever given a speech, Brian, that they are literally relinquishing power because they realize that it's the right decision for democracy and a right decision for this country. And to me, in this modern day history, or even in history, it will go down as one of the most consequential speeches that we will read about in history books, how a man who spent his entire political career since 29 relinquished that power at the clock when the clock was about to strike 12, and he did what was right for the American people. And looking back, he did do what was right when you look at all of the statistics that are coming in right now for Harris, and not just the statistics, but the enthusiasm around the Democratic Party, to where 88% of the Democratic Party right now are extremely enthusiastic around VP Harris.
So, Johnathan, we know that on this podcast, when it comes to numbers, I'm not the one to be trusted. Like when I try to do simple math, bad things happen. But you, on the other hand, are a master of the numbers. You're like our Steve Kornacki, if you will. So can you quantify for us some of the numbers as it relates to showing that Kamala Harris is really heading in the right direction? I know there's been some of those Zoom calls that have been happening that have raised a bunch of money. A bunch of Act Blue donations have come in. What do you have as far as kind of letting the people know quantitatively that things are heading in the right direction for Vice President Harris?
Yeah, I've never seen to where we would have 40 plus thousand black women and 40,000 plus black men hold Zoom calls where they're raising multiple millions of dollars for the Harris campaign. And when I was just when I heard some little clips of the recording, it wasn't just like your typical conversation. It was enthusiastic conversation. There was talks about what Harris could bring to the table as far as a biracial woman as president, and not to mention that. And then the most shocking thing, like some people would probably expect the black community, right, Brian, to get behind a biracial vice or presidential nominee. But then the white women showed up and had 150,000 plus people on a Zoom call that raised, again, it was about $2 million for the Harris campaign. And this is stuff that in my lifetime, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I've never heard of something like this organized so fast and raise so much money and have so much backing in my lifetime. Like, I'm completely blown away just by looking at the numbers, and I'm sitting there tracking the Act Blue donations. And after the 69 million and the $60 million day following, she's still raising roughly $20 million a day through Act Blue, or Act Blue's raising that much money. And if you look previously, it was $2 to $3 million a day. So there's still, like, everybody talks about this Caitlin Clark effect. I'm calling it the VP Harris effect. Okay. And that's what's happening right now in the Democratic Party.
I knew you'd get a Caitlin Clark reference in there somehow. Hey, we gotta give kudos. The Zoom call that was the over 150,000 white women was organized in 72 hours by Shannon Watts. If you're not familiar, Shannon
Mhm.
Watts is an activist whose main goal has
An
been
activist.
really,
Yep.
yeah, an activist has, but she's really been working on trying to help fix the gun violence problem we have in this country, and
Yes.
and working on gun control stuff. And she basically tweeted out on X like, "Hey, kind of almost sarcastically, like, where's the white woman Zoom?" And she got all sorts of responses like, "Hey, let's do this." And there's a great article that I read about how that came together, and it came together in 72 hours, and she had more than 150,000 women on this phone call. There is some serious excitement about Kamala Harris, and people are not just jumping on Zoom calls, but as you said, with the Act Blue donations and the other donations, people are putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, absolutely. They're putting their money where their mouth is. And right now, the Harris campaign came out and stated that they have raised 200 million plus dollars since the endorsement from President Biden. And the key part of this is that 66% of those, Brian, are first time donors. So that means that's people that typically wasn't reaching out to the Democratic Party or donating to the Democratic Party is now. And that's huge. And we're not even talking about the PAC numbers or the PAC money that's going to come across the table in the future and has come across in the sums of $150 million. But this all happened the moment that President Biden endorsed uh, Miss Harris, VP Harris, for presidency. And we're talking now just a few hours past 7 days exactly since she started pushing for the delegates to become the Democratic Party presidential nominee.
Yeah, and listen, I love all the enthusiasm. I love all the excitement in doing a bunch of research and just reading everything I possibly can over the last week. Here's the one thing that we need to just listen. Don't stop your excitement. Don't stop your enthusiasm. Continue pushing forward.
Oh,
But
yes.
if if the other side starts to get their ducks in a row, there's going to be some pushback, right? Like, everything I had read about what was happening in the Trump campaign is they were singularly focused on facing Joe Biden and really had nothing planned if he decided to step aside for Kamala Harris or anyone else. That everything they had, one of the reasons maybe that they picked J.D. Vance, and I know we'll talk about him in the next segment, as VP is because basically they were like, we're going to beat Joe Biden. That's all we have to think about. We could pick the weird, boring guy that, Diet Mountain Dew boy as the VP candidate because we don't have to think about anything else. And lo and behold, Joe Biden does the selfless thing and steps aside, and they were not prepared for it. Now, it's been a week, and they're going to, if they have their ducks in a row. Now, the problem.
Donald Trump actually asked on a post on True Social that he was so focused on President Biden that he's asked for a refund from the DNC because of the money he spent targeting President Biden that now he feels like was just a wasted money, which in hindsight it was a wasted money now that that Harris is going to be the Democratic presidential nominee because she has secured over the amount needed. And right now, by my counts, the last I looked yesterday early was 3,393 delegates that she secured.
Yeah, so listen, they're going to do this for real. They're going to have electronic balloting and voting before the convention even starts. So there will be no floor battle. There'll be no weird candidate putting their name up. There'll be none of that, as we would say in Yiddish, Michigats, as we head towards the convention. But here's the thing about the Trump campaign, right? Is his team can suggest to Donald Trump, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, we need to start countering what Vice President Kamala Harris and her campaign is doing. The problem is that when you have Donald Trump as your candidate, he's very likely not to listen to anyone and do whatever he thinks is right, which is going to not go over well.
No, it's not. And here's another problem that they're having. They have Governor Andy Beshear that's jumping around in all these red districts right now. I mean, he was just in Georgia in a red district and got a attendance of hundreds of people. They have Shapiro out there campaigning. They have Newsom out there campaigning. They have Walls out there
Pete,
campaigning. They have
Pete
Whitmer out there.
Buttigieg is going on Fox News
Pete
like he
is
always does.
going on Fox News like crazy. So really, they have no like they're so back on their heels right now, and the Democratic for the first time is actually messaging the way they should have at the beginning for President Biden because now they're on the offense, they're not on the defense. And Pete, to me, articulate wise and going on Fox News could be the key to this entire election because he's straight up over there just debunking the hell out of them.
Yeah, Pete Buttigieg has the Fox News appearance down. I mean, he
Oh,
totally comprehends how to
Diamond.
handle those people. He's calm, he's collected, he presents facts. Whatever they're throwing at him, he takes it and throws it back at him. It's like he is. I mean, he's so calculated in those appearances. It's unbelievable to watch. It really is something to behold.
Yeah, I every time I listen to Transportation Secretary Pete talk, I'm mesmerized just by how much information he's able to take with him into these conversations and kind of lead them into where he wants the conversation to go. But it is always puzzling to me why Fox News continues to have him on their show when he's literally helping Harris and the Democratic down the ticket voting throughout the nation. And we've seen that just in the most recent Fox polling favorable rating on 4 different states that was just released to where it's showing that even Harrison favorability rating since the President Biden endorsed her has jumped 8 points. And since July 6th has jumped like 16 points. So the motivation is definitely in Harris's the corner, but let's make sure that we don't back off. Let's not get complacent. Democracy is definitely on the ballot. So we have to continue to push VP Harris over the finish line.
By the time this episode is released, we're always transparent. We record this on a Sunday evening. It'll be released Monday morning. By the time the episode is released, we'll be under 100 days left until November. And that means you got to keep your eye on the ball. Sorry to use a sports reference, Jonathan. I know, you don't, unless it's Caitlin Clark or the 92 Bulls. You don't want to discuss sports. I get that. Our conversation before the show started in our text chat, Jonathan was ripping different sports in the Olympics because, oh, that's not a sport. Oh, blah, 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 blah. It's fine. I get it. Matt, our double secret producer and editor, Matt and I are sports guys. You're not. We get it. It's fine. Listen, you talk about favorability ratings, and Kamala Harris is up here. On the other hand, someone's favorability rating who is not up there is JD Vance. And we have to talk about him on the other side. And we will do that. We will talk about JD Vance and more coming your way after this. You're listening and watching Ford News. Welcome back to Ford News. He is Johnathan Ford. Follow him on X at FordJohnathan5. I am Brian London. Follow me at MiamiRadioBeast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, Audible, Spotify, Apple, wherever it is. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, ring the bell, do all that stuff, make a comment, and that'll help us out a lot. Jonathan, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, if you will. So Donald Trump and the MAGA party decided, hey, it doesn't even matter who we pick as the VP candidate. We're just going to win this thing hands down. It doesn't even matter. So we'll just pick JD Vance. And so far, that has gone over like a lead balloon. Mountain Dew boy, a.k.a. I don't like women boy, a.k.a. we don't even talk about anything else boy. Not so good so far. Can you quantify the they must have gotten a huge bump, right, after the RNC when they put JD Vance up as the vice presidential nominee, right? Huge bump, or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely wrong. And historically, Brian, it is a bump of about 19 points during any type of convention when a vice president is named. But unfortunately, JD Vance has actually had the opposite effect and is actually a -6
Oh,
when announced as the vice president at the Republican National Convention. And it's almost like there was little to no vetting done as far as his favorable rating, which is significantly lower than what most VP picks or running mates are. And also just some of the stuff that we're hearing coming out recently of positions he's had politically, not to mention his previous stance against Donald Trump as far as hopefully nobody takes an offense to this, but he basically called Donald Trump the American Hitler. And he's repeatedly through the 2016 timeframe had been adamant about his disgust for Donald Trump, but now he finds himself as the vice president on the ticket.
yeah. More and more every day I hear audio clips or see video clips of JD Vance saying negative things about Donald Trump. I don't know where he turned to the dark side, but somewhere he did. But Jonathan, we were talking about Sarah Palin before we started the segment, and that was one of the worst VP choices ever. And and JD Vance makes Sarah Palin look like I don't know,
Genius.
Eleanor Roosevelt. Just Einstein. Just
Sure.
ridiculousness.
Yeah, it's crazy. We were talking about how Sarah Palin, when she was picked, she had a +24 point the bump for John McCain at the time, and we all know the history of that and how that ended up being the worst thing that John McCain could have done for his presidential run, and probably, well, not probably, it was the reason he lost the election and against, of course, President Barack Obama at the time.
Yeah, she was terrible. She could see Alaska. I mean, she could see Russia from her front door. JD Vance is worse though. This guy, he literally brings nothing to the table. I'm not going to say that he's not smart. Like he could be very intelligent. He just doesn't have it politically, though. I don't know how Ohio elected him as a senator. I do know
And
that
Ryan,
he's not. Yeah, he's not just weird or awkward, but just his misogyny, like the way he talks about women, cat
mhm.
women and all this stuff is just like this is not going to get you elected.
No, no, not at all. And what else is a hot point for the Democratic Party, and what is elevating people to want to be more active in the Democratic process is abortion. And JD Vance has been vocal about he supports a federal ban on abortion, which to me, and I've said this repeatedly, that abortion rights or reproductive rights will be the number one issue for uh, the voters this year, including what we're kind of seeing in Florida right now with the villages in Florida where golf carts after golf carts have come out in support of Harris. But back to JD Vance, it's going to be very I'm very curious to see what the leading days or weeks we will be, because even politically, speech wise, he's boring and awkward. He just doesn't seem like somebody that's very good at this. And we talk about how could he have won his Senate race? Well, one, he was up against Tim Ryan, who basically distanced himself from President Biden and was very competitive with uh, combative with the Democratic Party, even during that election. And then that's how we ended up with JD Vance.
The other thing is, he's come out with these cockamamie things like, "Oh, if you don't have kids, you're not worth anything." And listen, and we even saw Jennifer Aniston take to Instagram and say, "Well, some people either choose not to have kids or can't have kids medically, cannot have a kid. Why are we worth less than you?" It's just messaging that's just not going over well. I don't understand what you're doing because I mean I guess the thought process is by the Trump campaign and JD Vance is we only need white men to get elected. I mean
Yeah,
that's white Christian men, I should say.
and here was the big key to all that. And you make great points about how many women that have not been able to have children, even though they've wished upon that and it's been painful in their life. That brings up just more of a talking point for the Democratic Party as far as making sure that we protect IVF. But we could also talk about how uh, Kam- uh, Kamala Harris's husband, Doug, ex-wife, came out and basically said that VP Harris has been a co-parent. She's fierce, and that they love her, and that she has been a huge part of the children's lives, and that she has been a parent in this relationship. So it just shows how desperate the Republican Party is, and attempting to get something to stick to VP Harris, as she is just at this right now running away with it.
So a couple things. I know you'll do your Ford fact check in the next segment, but just a couple of facts because it was brought up. Hey, JD Vance is saying, VP Harris can't be a good president because she never gave birth. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. No president in history has actually given birth that I know of. I'm
Zero.
pretty sure. Yeah, zero. And also, believe it or not, George Washington was a stepdad, didn't have his own kids. So, what are we doing? I just, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that MAGA is picking the wrong messaging to get elected. but it's completely asinine to me what this
Well, it
guy
just
is
shows the
doing.
misogyny because if she had kids, it would be she couldn't be president because the kids would get in the way of her making decisions as
Right,
president,
right, exactly
or
right.
she'd be too emotional because it would
Correct.
impact her children. So now they don't have that because of whatever the circumstances are in VP Harris's life. And that's between her and her family. But now that they don't have that, they have to change it to where it's now that she's not made any of those decisions as a woman, that she can't make decisions for the country. So that's where the Republican Party keeps showing their misogyny, and not only that, but their hypocrisy uh, throughout all these years. And I think this is going to be the tone going forward. But I think the American people are starting to um, grasp what the Republican Party is all about, and it's starting to show in every metric that I've looked at in the past 7 days. And if this continues, it's only going to get worse for the Republican Party.
Oh, and by the way, the MAGA cult is going after Kamala for being either black or Indian American, depending on which side they want to go after at what time, at what point in time, because she's biracial. Um, JD Vance's wife is not white, and he actually had to defend that this week. He actually had to come out and say, "My wife isn't white." And when I saw that, I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, he basically says, despite my wife being not being white, I still love her, and she's still great,
Come on.
a great wife and great to children. And we all know that Usha Vance is just things that I've read up on her. She's a very articulate and smart and beautiful lady that doesn't deserve any of this racism from either
No.
side. But where I mostly see it coming from is, of course, the Republican MAGA is basically attacking her due to her race when she's part of the ticket that Donald Trump selected to be a running mate.
I just yeah, I can't. I don't understand what is happening. I listen, I don't know, maybe Donald Trump uses his famous two words, "you're fired," to JD Vance and tries to replace him. I don't know what the rules are on the Republican side for doing that after he's already been
They would have to
nominated.
they would have to switch the rules. So they have to go in, the RNC would have to go in and change the rules. There is no rule right now that would allow him to do that. But obviously they can switch the rules. And there's already been talk, not like anything that I would stamp my name on, but there's also been talk that he could be looking for avenues to replace JD Vance in the near future. So I would just
So,
like to know who is in charge of vetting JD Vance leading up to this, like just extensively.
you know who was
The,
in charge? Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. That's where JD Vance came from. By the way, JD Vance would have to resign. If he resigns, then they can replace him. But Donald Trump just can't fire him. He would have to step down himself. And then there would be a way through the RNC rules in order to replace him. But yes, it wasn't the Trump campaign staffers that vetted JD Vance. It was Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, who I don't understand. He's a gay man that seems to not be supportive of LGBTQ rights, but
okay, yeah.
he's a billionaire who's basically gotten JD Vance every job he's ever had after law school. He got him jobs in San Francisco. He basically supported a Senate campaign. Everything that JD Vance has accomplished in his life post law school has been due to billionaire Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk led the way, supposedly, for Donald Trump to pick JD Vance as the VP. So, the same Elon Musk that was gonna give Trump 45 million a month, and now is not going to give Trump 45 million a month, and I don't know what's going on there, but
Well, he basically
we
claims
can't.
that he never made that guarantee in the first
Sure,
place.
Sure.
because he said he would not
Perfect.
donate the 45 that money to a cult personality, is what he said.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. I believe him. All right. We're gonna take a break. I need to cool off. We're gonna take a break. On the other side, we'll get to our favorite segment of the week. We'll get to the Ford fact check. That and more coming your way after this. You're listening and watching Ford News. Welcome back to Ford News. He is Johnathan Ford. Follow on X at FordJohnathan5. I'm Brian London. Follow me at MiamiRadioBeast. And now it's time for our favorite segment of the week. It's time for our Ford fact check. All right, Johnathan, what are we fact checking this week?
Well, we wanted to do something a little more relevant that was kind of a hot topic. And right now, with Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, actually going on Fox News and talking about the decrease in crime rate throughout the United States under the Biden administration, I wanted to make sure that people were clear that what he stated on Fox News is factually correct. And basically, in January and March, the violent crime dropped 15.2% compared to 2023, while murders fell 26.4%, rapes decreased 25%, and according to data, even robberies dropped 17%. And keep in mind, this is from the January to March. Meanwhile, property crime went down 15.1%. Burglaries dropped 16.7%. And theft decreased 17.3%. And we've actually seen a decrease pretty much every year since one of the highest marks of crime, which was 2020. That was, of course, under the Trump administration. Since then, crime rate on just about every statistical measure has dropped significantly.
So the messaging just is not. Let me rephrase that. The Democrats' messaging on crime has never been solid. I think the Republicans have had a better message on crime because we back the blue and all this stuff. We're hard on criminals, but when you look at the numbers,
Wow, their
the
nominee
crime
has 34 felony convictions.
correct. Well, yes, 1,000%. It's so hypocritical, but when you look at the numbers, the crime rates are down. There can be no dispute of that. The problem is right is that Republicans tend to run on, oh, they're trying to get you, right? Because they run on fear. There's criminals out there. There's migrants committing crimes. There's immigrants that are going to kill you. And the Republicans will fix all that. But they don't. That's the thing is, it's not one, it's not true. And two, they don't fix it. Joe Biden has done a good job of fixing it. Nothing's perfect. But the numbers you just went through show that Joe Biden has done a good job when it comes to crime.
Yeah, you could also go as far as if people just take a moment, if you're listening to this, go look at the 20 of the most dangerous cities in the US per capita and go tell me which party holds the majority, not only in those states, but also what party does that city typically represent. And you'll find out the vast majority of our unsafest cities in America or are in Republican led areas, just like you could also go into education. They are typically the worst ran states and are typically welfare states of democratic states. But if you go and just look at the statistics I just gave you, President Biden has done a phenomenal job. But we've also, Brian, I mean, you've talked about how bad previously the Democratic Party was as far as messaging. I mean, we've talked about this repeatedly on podcasts. We've talked about it amongst ourselves of how bad they are in messaging. And we're starting to see, like I said earlier in this podcast, a different tone to the Democratic Party to where they're on the offense. And what Pete did today on Fox News was simply just a master class of knowledge that had the host completely just dumbfounded by how many numbers he was throwing out.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, just crazy that the messaging is just not good enough to support the great job that Joe Biden has done. Pete Buttigieg has done a great
Mhm.
job whenever he's gotten the opportunity to do that. And we just got to keep pushing, right? You, me, and everybody else on our side of things. We just have to keep pushing the facts out there, and maybe eventually someone that needs to see it will see it. That's the thing, right? Is not just getting the messaging out, but getting it to the people that might be impacted by it. Because our side, right? We get our messaging. It's the people in the middle. It's the undecideds. Listen, I
Mhm.
don't think there's anything that I can say to the most ardent Trump cultist, the most MAGA cult fan, that's going to change their mind. But there is undecideds out there. There's people in the middle out there that need to know the facts.
Yeah, there's undecided out there, and and you make a good point. And I've said this on when I've been debating other people on TikTok is that the Democratic Party is always going to be the Democratic Party unless something drastically changes. But it's about getting the Democratic base that's this size right now and growing out that base, not only to reach the independents, but the undecided, but also get the Democrats that previously never voted to vote. And I think that's where the Harris campaign is kind of going right now. For one, they are going to the red districts and trying to flip some votes. You're starting to see that with um, the governor Andy Bashir going out to red districts or red areas and giving speeches. He was in Iowa a couple days ago. He was in a red district in Georgia today. But what we have to do is just grow Kamala Harris's uh, Kamala Harris's chances of winning the election by growing the Democratic voting base is by getting more voters out to support her in the 2024 election. But I will tell you, and I'm going to speak directly to the people, since there was only 88% of the Democratic Party that found VP Harris as favorable. And I think some of those are President Biden holdouts that are still of the 12% are still President Biden holdouts that still find a bad taste in their mouth. I will tell you that, and Biden will confirm that I was one of the most pissed off people when this went down. And I typically
True.
do not lose my cool because I supported Biden and I still believe President Biden would have won in the end. But it's now time, and it's time for the loyalist President Biden supporters, just like First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden said. It's now time for us to take that enthusiasm and that support and get behind VP Harris. So I'm asking you all, please get out, campaign for Harris, walk door to door for Harris, and most importantly, get in your car on election day, pick up wherever you can, and go vote.
Yes, no doubt about it. Hey, before we get out of here, Jonathan, we need to talk about. You talked about the big golf cart parade that was going through the
Yeah.
villages
Hmm.
here in Florida, and for those of you that don't know, since I'm from the state of Florida, or as we call it sometimes, Florida, um, the
Or I
villages
call it
is
hold my beer.
yeah, the Villages is basically an entire huge city that is like a 55 plus crowd. It's an entire kind of planned city for the 55 plus crew that's kind of in central Florida. It's over by Ocala and Gainesville, that area towards the central and west side of the state, right in the middle of the state. And it is full of just MAGA cultists. But lo and behold, Kamala Harris comes into the mix, and all of a sudden, you see huge support for Kamala Harris in the villages, which is really surprising. Now, the villages, when politicians come to Florida, right? They go to a few different places in order to get some votes. One would be, here in South Florida, right? Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. Specifically, you try to go court the Cuban vote down in Miami-Dade County, which is swung right a little bit. You go down to Calle Ocho in Little Havana. You go hang out at Versailles. You get some cafecito. You get some pastelitos. And you hang out down there and try to get some votes. You want to make sure you hit the I-4 corridor, which runs right through the center of the state. I-4 is a highway that goes from like Daytona Beach to Tampa, runs through the center of the state, runs through Orlando and the Disney World area, but it does run close to the villages, but not right there. And then you go to the villages, because the villages is a huge voting block. So really important to get those voters. To see all those golf carts running through the village with the Harris signs was really cool. But Johnathan, I want to shout out a couple of congressional candidates that have started to follow us and follow the show, and we found out about up in the middle of the state. On X, they reached out to you. You reached out to them. But Barbie Hardin Hall, she's running for Congress in the 11th district, which is the villages right up to Disney World. So that's an important area. We've got Whitney Fox. She's running in the 13th district. That's in Pinellas County. That's, the Tampa St. Pete area. And then we got Jennifer Adams, and she's running for Congress in the 7th district. And the 7th district, I think, is over on the East Coast, closer to, the Space Coast and Daytona Beach, that area. So we got to give props to those 3 congressional candidates. And if there's any other congressional candidates that want to jump on board with Ford News, feel free. We'd love to have you on. And I need to, put a shout out as we talk about Florida possibly, maybe being in play, Johnathan. One of the most important races that we can keep our eyes on is the race between Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, who was a congresswoman from down here in South Florida, who is challenging Rick Scott for the Senate. Rick Scott, who committed the biggest fraud against Medicare in this nation's history, is still a senator from the state, and he can be beaten. He is not liked here, but he is still in power. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell can beat him if things go the right way. But we need to support our progressive candidates here in the state of Florida to put Florida in play, because if Kamala Harris wins Florida, that's it. It's over.
It's over. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually just strolling through X, and it was late. I mean, some of you guys could see my post. I sleep schedule is kind of weird, but I went through and I ran across some of the posts from these candidates, and I'm just like, why do they not have more followers or support on X? And I was just like, somebody that likes to encourage women empowerment. I have to do something with my platform to encourage others to follow these wonderful candidates. So I didn't just automatically just say follow them blindly. I actually went and read their websites to make sure that it was somebody that I was going to endorse personally before, and knowing Brian that he would also endorse. And that's when I decided to go ahead and reach out to them, and we've already grown some of their following by a couple thousand followers. So we're headed in the right direction in Florida. And those ladies have told me personally in threads that they believe Florida is actually winnable for VP Harris in the 2024 election. And like Brian said, Pennsylvania won't matter. There'll be other states that won't matter if Harris campaigns in Florida and it returns to what some people would consider a battle ground state like it had in the previous, where it would go Obama, then Bush. I mean, it was flipping back and forth between parties. It would be game over for Donald Trump. But um, one last thing that I want to just talk about, or a question I have for Brian, is what would typically be the following in the villages or in previous elections? Would you ever see anything like the response VP Harris is getting right now in that particular area?
Not recently. I can tell you firsthand because I've been up there and I know people that live up there that you might have gotten it for Barack Obama's first election maybe, but certainly not since then. You would not have seen that kind of enthusiasm for a candidate on the Democratic side, up in the villages. It's become complete Trump country. It's become MAGA central. Um, for a lot of reasons. It has to do with the demographics, but yeah, and listen, there's always been progressives that have lived there. The thing, Jonathan, is they just have felt too scared and intimidated to be vocal about it because they're surrounded. And in this instance,
Mm.
they felt confident enough to come out of the woodwork, and there was a lot of them. There was a lot of them. It was a
A
huge
lot.
story down here in the state of Florida.
Yeah, it's great. It was really refreshing for me to see, and I will just let people know that even weeks ago, I probably said one of the most outlandish things I've ever said in my life, and I know I told others this. I don't know if I told Brian this, but I felt that even President Biden had a chance to win Florida. And now I think even more so, VP Harris has a better chance to win Florida in the 2024 election.
Yeah. So just so you know, so when we look at the electoral college, right? Everyone's talking about Pennsylvania. There's 19 electoral votes there. Talk about
Hmm.
Michigan. That's 15 electoral votes there. People are talking about Wisconsin. Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes. You know how many electoral votes Florida has? 30. So California has the most at 54. New York has a lot. New York has 28, so less than Florida. Texas has 40. Florida has 30. So I think it's the third most electoral votes. So, you can win Florida and not win Pennsylvania and not win Michigan and still win the election if you're Kamala Harris.
Correct. And that's where even articles are stating that, and they didn't mention Florida, they just mentioned other scenarios, but Kamala definitely has more ways to 270 currently than what Donald Trump does. And I'm very enthusiastic about more so now than what I was, even though my boy, President Joe Biden, is gonna go off into the sunset after this presidency and enjoy his life of retirement with his family and friends. But I am enthusiastic because I see a younger generation of leadership just with the Harris campaign coming out and being vocal, which is extremely encouraging that we didn't see that 6 months ago that we're seeing now. I mean, I didn't even know who Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear was until somebody's like, yeah, the Kentucky Andy Beshear is a VP nominee. And I'm like, who is this guy? So, I mean, there's other ones that have come out vocally that I had no clue who they were as well, as far as their stance politically.
Speaking of VP candidates, so our luck would be is that we would drop this episode, right? We're recording this on Sunday night. We'll drop it Monday morning. And in the meantime, Kamala Harris is going to choose who she wants her running mate to be. We promise you, no matter what, when the VP selection comes down, we will get to our computers and do an emergency podcast and have it for you immediately. We'll get it up on YouTube. We'll get it to all of our podcast platforms. So we will have our thoughts on who the VP candidate is, no matter when that happens. We might have to wake Jonathan up from his stupor when he's sleeping in the middle of the day because he works in the middle of the night and he's up all night and he's posted on X at 4 a.m. and on TikTok having debates at 3 a.m. and he's all over the place. We'll get Jonathan up and we will record an emergency podcast to make sure that we cover that event.
Thanks,
But
Brian.
Jonathan,
Your prediction, Brian. Your prediction. Who's it going to be?
who's it gonna be? I was really thinking it was gonna be Shapiro from Pennsylvania, but I'm really seeing a lot of Tim Walz from Minnesota. And I know that might be a surprise and that might kind of come out of nowhere, but he's been making the media rounds and he's been sounding pretty good. So we'll have to see. But I'm kind of leaning, I would say 55-45 Walz to Shapiro. How about you?
I am going Andy Bashir. I believe
Oh,
that
okay.
Kentucky has a lieutenant governor that is Democratic, and he's allowed to appoint that lieutenant governor to the governorship. And I think he will pull moderate Republicans and independents into the Harris campaign or to vote for Harris. But no matter what, it's a talented field. But I just feel more comfortably personally with Andy Bashir. And then a close second to me would be Shapiro.
Yeah. You did mention it. The good thing is the Democrats have a pretty deep bench. So
Oh,
they
yeah.
can there's a bunch of guys, a bunch of people, a bunch of people they can count on to fill whatever position they need. All right, that's gonna do
I
it
mean,
for us
even
on this
recent polls, the
episode.
fact that oh,
No, go
Pete
ahead.
actually, a new polling came out just earlier today that actually showed that Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg actually has a more favorable rating than any of the people we just mentioned. I don't think it'll be him, but it just shows how deep even Democrats believe that our bench is right now to step up to the VP spot.
Yeah, I can only imagine that if this country elects a biracial woman president and a gay vice president, that heads will absolutely explode, which I'm all here for.
Me too.
All right, that'll do it for us on this episode of Ford News. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, smash that bell on YouTube to watch our pretty faces doing the show. Stay tuned to the YouTube channel all week long. We'll have all sorts of updates for you, and we appreciate you for watching and listening. We appreciate you so much. Follow Johnathan on X at FordJohnathan5. Follow me at MiamiRadioBeast. We'll see you next time here on Ford News.